The announcement that the French government is teetering on the brink of collapse, with Emmanuel Macron under unprecedented fire to resign, has sent shockwaves not only across Paris, but throughout the entire world. France, long considered the beating heart of Europe's democracy and one of the continent's most influential powers, now finds itself facing a political crisis so deep and so extraordinary that even its closest allies are watching in disbelief. This is not simply a story of domestic instability. It is a global event that touches on questions of governance, democracy, economic survival, and France's place in an increasingly unstable world order. To understand the depth of this moment, one must first step back and consider the long trajectory of Emmanuel Macron's rise to power. When he emerged on the political scene, Macron represented something fresh, something bold, and something that seemed to carry the promise of renewal. He was young, charismatic, and seen as an outsider who had broken free of the rigid two-party system that had dominated French politics for decades. His victory in 2017 was historic, painting him as a modernizer who could bridge divides, revitalize the economy, and restore France's confidence both at home and abroad. Yet, as the years unfolded, the optimism gave way to turbulence. Macron faced a succession of crises that eroded his popularity, tested his leadership, and chipped away at the very legitimacy of his government. From the yellow vest protests that paralyzed the streets of Paris, to the fury over pension reforms that sparked mass strikes, to growing discontent with his handling of economic inequality, Macron's presidency has often felt like a constant state of firefighting. Each attempt at reform, no matter how well-intentioned, seemed to ignite a new storm of opposition. Now, however, the storm has reached a scale unlike anything before. What makes this moment so explosive is not just another protest or another unpopular law, but the cumulative weight of anger, distrust, and frustration that has been building for years. It is a collapse of confidence in leadership itself. The French government today is not simply weakened. It is in freefall, and Macron, once celebrated as the youngest French president in history, is being cornered by calls for his resignation that grow louder each passing day. Observers point to multiple triggers for this dramatic downturn. Economically, France is under strain. Inflation, rising energy prices, and the lingering aftershocks of global instability have left ordinary citizens struggling. The sense of inequality between the wealthy elite and the working class, between Paris and the provinces, between the globalized economy and those left behind, has deepened resentment. Politically, Macron's centrist movement, which once claimed to unite left and right, now finds itself isolated. With the traditional parties weakened, the opposition has been able to regroup in extremes, with both the far right under Marine Le Pen and the far left gaining momentum. Macron, instead of being the bridge builder, has become the lightning rod. In the French streets, the anger is palpable. Massive demonstrations have returned with a force that rivals the yellow vest era. Protesters are not merely demanding policy changes. They are calling for the government to step down. Slogans calling for Macron's resignation now echo through Paris, Marseille, Lyon, and other cities. The symbolism is striking. The very same boulevards where the French Revolution once unfolded are again filled with citizens shouting against their rulers, reminding the world that the spirit of defiance runs deep in France's DNA. Internationally, the implications are equally dramatic. France is not just another European country. It is a founding member of the European Union, a nuclear power, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and a critical actor in global diplomacy. Its instability shakes the very foundations of European unity at a time when the continent already faces challenges from war in Ukraine, economic competition from Asia, and internal divisions over migration and energy. For allies like Germany, the prospect of France descending into governmental collapse is unthinkable, for it risks weakening the Franco-German axis that has long been the engine of the EU. Meanwhile, adversaries are watching closely. Nations that often find themselves at odds with France and Europe, Whether Russia, China, or certain Middle Eastern actors see opportunity in this turmoil. A weakened French government means a weakened European front, a distraction from global power struggles, and a vulnerability that can be exploited in diplomacy, trade, or security. But perhaps most striking is the question of leadership. Macron has always positioned himself as a visionary for Europe, someone who could drive integration, strengthen alliances, and defend liberal democracy. Now, with his own government on the verge of collapse, critics argue that his credibility is shattered. How can a man who cannot calm his own streets claim to lead Europe through crisis? How can a president who faces chance of resign command authority at the global stage? The push for Macron to step down is gaining momentum, not just from the streets but from within political corridors. Opposition parties smell blood, seizing the chance to force either snap elections or a full resignation. Even within Macron's own party and allies, voices of doubt are rising. For years, loyalty to Macron was tied to the perception that he was invincible, that he was the only one capable of keeping France on track. But now, as polls show plummeting approval ratings and surging support for opposition figures, that aura of invincibility has vanished. Yet Macron has shown time and again that he is not one to step aside easily. His resilience, some argue, borders on stubbornness. Even in the face of enormous protests, he has pushed forward, insisting that reforms are necessary, that leadership requires tough choices, and that short-term pain is justified for long-term gain. The question is whether this defiance is strength or whether it is delusion. For in politics, as history shows, when the tide of public anger grows too powerful, even the strongest leaders can be swept away. The French people today stand at a crossroads. Their anger is not merely against one man or one government. It is against a system they increasingly see as detached from their struggles. The protests are fueled not only by specific grievances, but by a deeper sense that democracy is being eroded, that the elites are unaccountable, and that the social contract itself is broken. This is why calls for Macron's resignation resonate so powerfully. They are not just about replacing one leader with another. They are about demanding a reset of the entire political order. Across Europe, leaders are scrambling to respond. The collapse of a French government could trigger cascading effects on markets, trade, and security. The euro has already shown signs of volatility, and investors fear uncertainty. NATO allies are concerned that instability in Paris could weaken collective defense strategies. The European Union, already tested by Brexit and divisions over migration, now faces the possibility of another existential crisis. But for the French people themselves, the focus is on dignity, justice, and representation. The chants in the streets, the strikes that paralyze industries, the blockades on highways, all are signs of a population that feels unheard and is now forcing the government to listen. Macron, whether he clings to office or steps down, cannot ignore that his presidency has entered its most perilous chapter. This crisis is more than just a French story. It is a global reminder of how fragile governments can be when they lose the trust of their people. France, with its proud history of revolution and democracy, is once again a stage where the battle between authority and liberty is being fought. The collapse of Macron's government, or even the specter of it, serves as a warning to leaders everywhere. When leaders ignore the voices of the people will rise. The days ahead will determine the fate not only of Emmanuel Macron, but of France itself. Will the president weather yet another storm and reassert control? Or will he be forced into the history books as the leader who could not survive the wrath of his people? And if the government falls, what comes next? Will France find renewal, or will it descend into deeper chaos? What is certain is that the world is watching closely. The fall of Macron's government would not be the end of France, but it would mark a turning point, a reminder that even the most seemingly stable democracies can unravel when trust collapses. France has been here before, and each time it has emerged transformed. Whether this transformation leads to renewal or ruin will depend on the choices made now. in this historic moment. And so, as the protests continue, as the calls for resignation grow louder, and as the government struggles to hold itself together, one truth stands above all. The French people have spoken, and their voices may soon decide the fate of a president and the future of a nation.